Every day you wake up with a choice. You can either face life's challenges head on or let life happen to you. A few years ago, as a family, we decided to make a change. We wanted to become wildly capable. Now we're on a mission to equip ourselves with the knowledge and skills necessary to thrive. We want to train hard and run fast towards our goals. And we apply this energy to every aspect of our lives. Parenting, business, health, and marriage. This show is designed to explore ways to increase our capacity and enable us to aggressively live out our calling. We don't shy away from challenge. We charge the storm. This is the Wildly Capable Show. So today's guest is Isabela of Canine Karma Training. Isabela is a certified canine nutritionist and professional dog trainer. Through her professional canine nutrition services, she helps dog owners improve their pets' overall health and well-being, as well as address and heal chronic health issues through customized diet and supplement plans. Her approach focuses on nutrition, natural supplementation, lifestyle changes to ensure lasting improvements in both the health and behavior. I feel like you are a holistic nutrition and fitness coach for dogs. Am I right?
I mean, that's a really great way to describe it. My profession, my specialty is definitely diet. You can call it food therapy, you can call it whatever you'd like, but nutrition is really where all of my education is in. Supplementation goes along with that, I believe, whether that's, supplementation to provide a balanced diet or to support a pet's, individual needs. And fitness as well. I can give all of my clients really great advice about how to get their dog into a better body condition, whether they're trying to lose weight, gain weight. So yeah, I definitely would call it a health and fitness coach for dogs.
I love that. Isabela, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited. We don't personally own a dog, but we were previous dog owners, both growing up as children, and lots of our family members and friends have dogs. And so I just know, we call it man's best friend. Like, your dog is so important to you. It's really another member of your family. And so often there's health complications we just don't have answers to. And so we're going to dig into a lot of the why and then what we can do to help our pets live the best life. I'm excited for that conversation. So I do want to start out by just saying, what are you currently seeing with dogs? What's the status of their overall health? What are some of the things that they are facing right now, given their modern lifestyle?
Overall, I mean, I might be a little bit more biased because people are seeking my help because most of the time their dog is struggling, whether that's with their health or with their behavior, because I'm also a dog trainer. So people bring me their very unwell dogs, whether that's physically or mentally. But for, as a whole, we're going to talk about health and nutrition today, but our dogs are not doing well, and chronic illness is at an all-time high. So we're seeing extremely high rates of cancer. 1 in 2 dogs will die with or from cancer. And that is a shocking statistic. I'm personally experiencing it. I have, a year ago, I had 4 dogs. Now, one of them I, lost to cancer a year ago. I have a dog who's currently, has cancer. That is the story that I know a lot of people, whether it's their own pets or a really close family member's pets, but cancer is at an all-time high. And if you speak to anyone above the age of 35, that wasn't a reality 30, 40 years ago. Everyone's dogs weren't dying of cancer. Dogs used to die of old age. And I personally don't feel like that happens anymore. Aside from cancer, which is the big scary one, I'm seeing a lot of dogs with really chronic allergies, lots of skin issues, lots of chronic gastrointestinal issues, gastrointestinal upset, so chronic diarrhea, vomiting. I'm seeing a lot of obesity. I'm seeing a lot of diabetes. We see a lot of heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, all the things that are also currently plaguing us and our children in this country. But chronic illness as a whole is at an all-time high, and it's very concerning. And most people seek out my help because they've been to the conventional veterinarian and they got the medication and they did the procedure or the testing, and the dog is just not getting better. Or the dog gets better temporarily and then falls back into that, vicious cycle of symptoms. And the reason for that is that diet, we know as humans that diet is the cornerstone of health. I would consider it a cornerstone of health. If you want to be the healthiest version of yourself as possible, you need to care about what you're eating. And if you are currently struggling with a chronic illness, if you are struggling with eczema flare-ups or really bad gut issues or whatever it may be, you need to care about what you're eating. And if you came to some sort of, health professional and you said, okay, I'm really struggling with this, but I'm eating a processed food based diet, all I'm consuming is ultra processed foods, that would be the first place that we started with human
Mm-hmm.
health, right? I think we understand that if you want to be as healthy as possible, you need to minimize your processed food consumption
Mm-hmm.
and increase your whole food consumption. And with our pets, the complete opposite advice is pushed, which is very concerning to me. So with our pets, we are recommended, or all we know is to feed a processed food diet, dog food. When people think of dog food, they think of kibble.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, and in a lot of nutrition professionals' opinion, that is not the ideal diet for a dog. Doesn't mean it's bad. And I'm going to say that now. I'm not a kibble basher. I'm not a kibble shamer. If I think you have to meet people where they're at. If all they're able to do is feed kibble, there are plenty of ways to improve that. But going back to your original question, our pets are very unwell. They're not doing well. I'm seeing a lot of anxiety. I'm seeing a lot of aggression. That does also have ties to their physical health. If they're really unwell, they have chronic, a dysbiosis of the gut, their gut is a mess, or they're in pain, or they're uncomfortable and always itching, you're not going to have a very pleasant dog to deal with behaviorally. So it all ties together. But I think our dogs, they need help. They need their owners to put a little bit more effort really into their diet and be more intentional about how you're feeding them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I was growing up, there was always like based on the dog breed, I don't know, a suggested lifetime of your pet, right? And it was
Yeah.
always like the bigger your dog is, the less years they're going to live, is kind of how it was explained to me. And that smaller dogs tend to live a little bit longer. We had a purebred golden retriever is what we had growing up. And I was young when we got her, and she did not die of cancer. So and as I understand it, more or less, was fading off into old age before she expired.
She was what, 15?
She was 15. So, and her hips went out was like the first thing that happened, which a lot of people told us is very common with bigger dogs, that their joints kind of fail. Again, I don't know. This was the veterinarian telling us that, but
Sure.
I resonate with what you said in the very beginning. I almost wanted to confirm that and say, we grew up, I got a dog when I was, I don't know, 6 years old, and that dog did not get cancer. And yeah, that just wasn't my reality.
I will say towards the end of Sandy's life, your mom was adding different types of food and
She
dialing in her
was.
nutrition, and she was doing this research on the back end. She was like,
We might not have been the most normal family.
no, you guys were like the bougiest pet owners,
Yeah.
and you really extended her life, I think, a long way. I think she was even treated for potentially Lyme disease with some herbals. Your mom was like so dialed in because she wanted her to
Yeah.
have the best quality of life for the longest period of time. And then when she did eventually reach that point, yeah, you loved that dog so well. So I do think it's very interesting that everything you listed, the diabetes, the cancers, the chronic illness, it's like such a reflection of what we're seeing in the human population right now. And you think that, dogs are immune to this somehow. Like in my head, I think, oh, they're an animal. Squirrels aren't dying in my yard with tumors all over the side of their head. But dogs are domesticated, right? And so they are living a very human lifestyle as we are. They're indoors with us. They're eating a processed food potentially. And so it really does make sense as to why we're sort of both looking at the same outcomes here, and both scary, but also very encouraging to hear what you're going to share today about like how we can transform their health through food. So I think that's really cool.
I just want to, insert there. You can make a huge difference with diet, a huge difference. I mean, there's so many people that come to me, and the simplest diet changes completely gets rid of all of the issues that the dog is dealing with. Allergies, GI upset. So it's not like you have to completely turn into this dog nutrition fanatic and dedicate your life to this. It's really simple changes, but you just have to just be aware of, like you said, our dogs are domesticated. So they're living in our environments. We control every aspect of their life. They don't have any choices. They can't choose what they eat. They eat what we provide for them. They can't choose their source of water. They can't choose what cleaning products you use or don't use. If you treat your yard or if you don't, if they get to, go for a walk, that they don't get to choose any of that. We do. So it makes a lot of sense as to why they're struggling with the same things that we are, because they live the same lifestyle as us. So
100%. Well, let's dive in there. I'd love to hear, what is the optimal diet for a dog?
So, in general, just like with humans, I like a dog to consume as many whole, fresh foods as possible. So, a kibble is a processed food item. It's actually an ultra processed food item. It goes through different processes of like dehydration, rendering, extrusion. So, at the end, you get a really processed, low quality dog food that has to have a lot of vitamins and minerals added back to it to give it any sort of nutrition. And just for some like perspective, extrusion is the same process that we do with breakfast cereal. So we have to remember that our dogs are carnivores. They are carnivorous animals. They're not omnivores. They're technically facultative carnivores, which means that they should be consuming an animal protein-based diet, and they do if they have the option. But if there is plant matter available, or if there's like a easily consumable carbohydrate available, they will eat that, and they can get those nutrients from it. So a dog should be eating mostly a diet that is based in animal protein, meat, raw bone, fat, fish, organ meat, those type of food items, and they should have some carbohydrates or some veggies if the dog, specifically requires that. But ideally, it would be a whole fresh food diet versus a processed food. Now, there are really good quality kibbles out there. We could talk about that a little bit later. There's some that are significantly better than others, but a whole fresh food diet for a dog would look like either a cooked diet, a home cooked diet where you gently cook the food and gently cook it, because we don't want to cook these food items into oblivion because we're going to lose a lot of the nutrients, or a raw food diet. So it's my opinion that I love raw food for dogs. I also love cooked. I think it has its place, especially for dogs who are maybe a little bit older or immunocompromised for some reason, and we don't want to give them that higher bacteria load, or if the dog prefers it. But most dogs, puppies, adult dogs, senior dogs would do great on a raw food diet. So that is exactly what it sounds like. It's raw meat, raw bone, raw organ meat, fish, again, some veggies, maybe some eggs, but really nutrient dense whole food ingredients that your dog is designed to eat. Because again, they are carnivorous. So it is pretty much accepted across the board that the majority of their diet should be comprised of animal protein. And raw really freaks some people out when they first see it or when they first hear about it. Like, you're feeding your dog raw meat? It's disgusting. It's shocking. People have a lot of reactions to it. But one, I always like to remind people that human beings are the only animal on this planet that eats a cooked diet or that doesn't eat a raw food diet, right? There's no other animal on this planet that's cooking their food. So it's not absurd for another animal beside a human to consume a raw food diet. Now, if they're naturally would be consuming a raw food diet and they're carnivorous animals, raw meat is the obvious choice. And again, they are carnivores, so their digestive tract is very short. It's much shorter than ours, which doesn't allow for a lot of fermentation. So if they are exposed to pathogenic bacteria or something that would make us sick because of the way that our body is designed, your dog's body is equipped to handle that. Raw meat is very easily digested by them. The fat, the amino acids in raw meat is really easily utilized by them, so it's highly bioavailable. I mean, there are some people that argue that humans should be consuming raw meat.
Yeah.
Right? There's some people who eat raw chicken and raw beef.
Totally.
I'm not personally of that persuasion, but there are people who do it and are perfectly fine and would argue that raw meat doesn't make people sick. But for your dog, they have a very acidic stomach acid. Their body is equipped to handle raw animal protein. So when you do switch a dog to a raw food diet, which again, in my opinion, is the ideal diet for a dog, you notice smaller, less frequent stool, which is really interesting because there's less waste that your dog's body's eliminating. So when a dog eats a kibble diet, they have these giant, really stinky, generally soft poop. It's horrendous. Yeah. It's horrible. And again, we're dog trainers. So when I have a dog here on a really low quality kibble, their poops are enormous because there's so much waste that their body is getting rid of. Their body can't do anything with these ingredients, so they poop it out. But when you switch a dog to a raw diet, their stool is decreased. I'm not even exaggerating, to a quarter of the size. And if they had gone, had a bowel movement 3-4 times a day, they might have one once, maybe twice. So that's one huge difference that you see. You'll see healthier skin, a shinier coat. You'll see a decrease in any sort of skin allergies, especially if you're removing, the irritant from the diet. You notice healthier teeth. You notice more sustainable energy, higher energy. Overall, the dog's body just thrives on a raw food diet. And again, some dogs do really great on a cooked food diet. I find those to be few and far in between that actually need it. But with kibble itself, if you're feeding a high quality kibble, a lot of dogs will do great on that too. And again, I think you have to meet people where they're at. So if right now the idea of giving their dog this whole food diet where they have to go and source the ingredients is just overwhelming, there's a lot that you can do to a kibble diet. And one is just picking one that's higher quality, has less of the more problematic or more inflammatory ingredients.
I'm going to be honest, I never jumped on the greens supplement train until I found a green supplement that also had animal-based superfoods. So we're not just talking about plant-based superfoods in the supplement. The Ancestral Supplements Greens capsules contain a blend of many things. Let me read you the ingredients. They have an organ blend with desiccated liver, heart, kidney, pancreas, spleen, thymus, lung, intestine, and stomach. And then they have Superfood Greens organic blend of chlorella, spirulina, barley grass, alfalfa, spinach, organic broccoli, and oatgrass. And then for the organic reds, they have goji berry, tart cherry, kiwi, acai, blueberry, and pomegranate juice, cranberry, raspberry, and strawberry as well. And they have a prebiotic and probiotic blend. This is truly your gut's next favorite supplement. It's got, like I said, superfoods from both plant foods and animal foods, plus that prebiotic and probiotic blend. And then if you really want to elevate your gut-friendly supplementation, add in a jar of their colostrum. Go over to ancestralsupplements.com/homegrown. All of their supplements are third-party lab tested for purity. And then they also have a 60-day money-back guarantee. And with the code homegrown, you can save 15% off your order. If you're looking to elevate your gut health in 2025, that is my biggest recommendation, adding in this green supplementation along with the colostrum. And you can get that at ancestralsupplements.com/homegrown. A few years ago, we launched a home goods shop because we were creating products for our home that we loved so much, and you guys were asking for them. And one of the very first things we created and launched for that shop were our cotton coiled proofing baskets. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding them in the video right now. You can see both our 7-inch round and our 9-inch oval. These are well loved. I've been using these for years and I'm obsessed with them. I love that they're flexible. I love that you can sort of smush them and fit them in your drawer. They're not bulky. You can spot clean them when needed. They make a wonderful proofing basket because the goal of your proofing basket is really to not only give your dough shape while it's in the cold proof, but also to help whisk away moisture from your dough. You don't want your wet sourdough bowl or loaf sitting in like a puddle of its own moisture. You really want that outside to dry out appropriately. And that's why these cotton coiled proofing baskets are so perfect for that. We worked with a manufacturer here in the States. Manufacturer is even like a fancier term. A good friend of mine in Maine makes these for us, and we love them so much. They are 100% natural cotton rope, and they've been loved by so many of you guys. If you haven't checked out our sourdough proofing baskets, go over to shoptheh.com and check them out, and use the code homegrown at checkout for 10% off.
So talk to me about dog breed variations with this. And again, it's probably just a quick answer, but like I'm picturing like, a German Shepherd versus, right, like a pug. Mm-hmm. And like I'm imagining a German Shepherd eating like raw bone and fat, and right. And then I'm imagining this pug where, it almost looks like their teeth are even different, but maybe I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. Is there any variation for dog breeds that people should be aware of or concerned about? Or is it just across the board?
Across the board, I think every dog would do well on a raw diet unless they have, a specific health issue. Now, when it comes to breed specifically, Dalmatians are a little different. If you have a high uric acid Dalmatian, they don't tolerate purines in the diet very well. So they would need a specially formulated diet. Aside from that, whether it's a French Bulldog or a Great Dane, the nutrient the nutrient makeup of the diet doesn't have to be specific or particular to the breed. You're dealing with more, maybe different sizes of ingredients. So with a German Shepherd, you might feed them a larger turkey neck. And if it's a raw turkey neck, they can and should consume the whole thing. That's their source of calcium and phosphorus. And it's shocking for people to hear that because we're always taught don't give dogs bone.
Right.
But you're not supposed to give your dogs cooked bone. Cooked bone, no matter the type of it, it's really dangerous. It splinters in the stomach. They don't digest it properly. It can cause really bad digestive upset, intestinal perforation, blockages, stuff like that. So you don't want to feed your dog cooked bone. But raw bone is completely digested by your dog. So if you give your dog this giant, turkey neck, you're not going to see pieces of bone in the stool. It's completely digested. So you wouldn't probably feed that to a French bulldog. You might feed a ground bone, so something that's already minced, or you might feed them quail, because quail is really small and those bones are really easy to eat.
I see.
So you might just want to feed them smaller pieces, like chicken necks instead of a turkey neck, because a chicken neck is this big. That's easy to easily crunched by them.
Jaw strength. What are they capable of? Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even the biggest dogs, I don't recommend feeding any bone from really large animals. So I don't feed like elk or moose or venison bones. I don't feed beef bones. I don't feed a lot of pork bone, but chicken, turkey, duck, rabbit, quail, pheasant, all of those are really safe to feed and your dog can consume them entirely if it's appropriate for the size of the dog.
Okay, that's good to know. I was going to ask about wild game, or like what type of meat they should eat. Like, are we talking about poultry? Are we talking about red meat? Do you want to mix it up? Like, what's your preference?
So in general, whether we're talking about wild game or not, the majority of the diet should be comprised of red meat.
Okay.
You don't really want a white meat-based diet, which are going to be your poultries, because it doesn't have enough of the essential amino acids that we want to see in high amounts in the diet. So think taurine and stuff like that. So you want the majority of the diet to be red meat. Now, when it comes to wild game, they can eat pretty much everything except wild boar. You don't want to feed raw wild boar because they do carry, I believe it's trichinosis.
Yeah.
Same with bear. Bear.
You don't want to feed any carnivores to your dog. So you don't want to feed any sort of animal that consumes meat.
That makes sense.
You don't want to do shark or bear or coyote or fox or anything like that. That's a big no-no for dogs. But if you were to feed venison or elk or moose, that's incredible. It's extremely nutrient dense. It's a great addition to the diet. You just want to make sure that it's deep frozen. So it's in a deep freeze for at least 2 to 3 weeks before you feed it, because that's going to kill off a lot of parasites.
Okay. And then we'll thaw it and give it to them raw, preferably. Okay. Yep. And now, are they eating this ground? Are they able to rip out a steak? Can I just throw a roast in the bowl? Like, what does that look like?
So you can feed it ground if you have concerns about your dog chewing, because ground, they're just going to swallow it whole. Now, your dog their teeth are not made for chewing and grinding up food. So they don't chew like we do. They are just going to rip chunks of meat small enough that they think that they can swallow it, and they'll swallow it whole. So if you feed like a big roast, they're going to sit there and try to like rip chunks out of it that they can swallow whole. So I personally like feeding something ground or just cut into small cubes that that they can swallow whole and it's not going to be an issue of choking. Because most dogs, when you feed them raw meat, they get so excited they just vacuum it in. So you want to make sure it's small enough that they're not choking on it.
So we used to go every holiday season to New York, and we would go squirrel hunting. And I had this golden retriever, right? And the pretty manicured lawn golden retriever vibe, but then like when I would get a bunch of squirrels and I would dress them out in the cellar on our like bench, and she would stand there because she knew that the hearts and livers, I would give her the hearts and livers. And what you're saying about how they get like excited, we used to always joke about how her name was Sandy, how Sandy would get like really primal, like or like really like back to her roots. Like she would change in that moment when she was eating the livers and the hearts, to the point where like her energy levels would really spike almost.
That's funny.
And she would get very, very energized by the raw meat, and she loved it.
Yeah, we give our dog squirrel. My husband will shoot a squirrel and then we'll feed it to the dogs. They love it. It's really easy to eat. But what you mentioned, that it wakes something like primal in them. Most dogs are going to really love a raw food diet. And I think one of the biggest benefits that you see immediately when switching your dog to a whole food diet, now that could just be adding some raw meat to a kibble. You can totally do that. Small amounts at first. We don't want to upset their stomach. Anything new, even if it's great and really nutrient dense, can be upsetting to their stomachs, especially if you already have a dog with sensitive stomach. But it's so enjoyable to them. First of all, it's different. That variety is really important. Kibble is the same thing every single meal, every day. Like each piece is uniform. It's the same flavor, same texture, everything. So when you're giving them something like a raw heart from a squirrel or a canned sardine, just the fact that it's different and it's so highly palatable, I think that adds a lot of value to their life. I think it makes their meals much more enriching and much more exciting. And it's one of the most important parts of their day. It's what they look forward to the most is eating. And if you can make it something different and unique and fun, I think that's very valuable. So
That's awesome. The grocery stores around me always sell expired pumpkin as dog food. They are always like, they put up a sign and they say, your dogs will love this expired pumpkin. And I'm like, really? You're trying to get me to buy this? But is that a thing? Like, can we add this pureed pumpkin to their dog food? Is that actually adding nutrition to them, or are they just trying to empty their shelves?
Pumpkin is a really common addition to diets because it adds fiber. So if your dog is struggling with some diarrhea or some constipation, that might help to even out their stools. There's not a lot of nutrient qualities to it, but it can add some fiber. And if it's expired, I would smell it. If it smells off, I wouldn't feed it. If it looks fine, your dog is probably fine. They lick their butts and eat cat poop.
Right.
And eat dirt. So they'll be fine with a little expired pumpkin.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. I was always curious about that. And then I assume like the dog bones in the packages now, those look like almost like roasted to me, but I'm guessing those are just raw and aged.
So those are probably smoked.
Okay.
I don't like those. I don't know why they sell them and they're so popular. A lot of people are like, well, I fed this to my dog their whole life and they're great. And like, okay, if you speak to an internist, they do, intestinal blockage surgeries for those all the time. So I don't like to feed bone that has been dehydrated, smoked, cooked, just altered in any way. I think you either feed a raw bone or you don't feed the bone at all.
Okay.
It makes me way too nervous to do anything in between.
Wow. Okay, that's really good to know because I see them all over the little like aisle at the grocery store, and sometimes I buy them for my little what would you call that? Like my little nephew puppies. And now I'm gonna stop buying those for them and just give them, raw turkey necks or something, chicken.
Yeah, and if you're at the pet store, do like a bully stick, which is just muscle meat. It's not bone. That's safer. Dogs still love it. It's still really widely available.
Okay, that's good to know. What about deer antler? I also see that sold as dog chew.
A lot of dogs do great on it. So typically, as a general rule, I don't like to feed a dog anything that is harder than the enamel of their teeth, especially if you have an aggressive chewer. So a deer antler, if it's something that you have personally, I don't know if it's foraged is the right word.
Harvested.
Harvested.
Yeah.
They're a little bit softer. So typically that's okay. Just monitor your dog. Because if they're really crunching down on it, especially on an antler from the store that's been dried out, it's been sitting there for a while. If it's harder than the dog's tooth enamel, something eventually is going to give. And you don't want there to be a dental fracture or a piece of their tooth chipping off. Because again, if they're chewing on something really, really hard and they're really crunching down on it, there's going to be some sort of stress fracture. So I like to be cautious. If you have a really gentle chewer that kind of just nurses it and babies it and they carry it around, there's some dogs that are really gentle and sweet like that. It's probably fine. But if you have dogs like mine that sit there and chew, like crunch down on it, like their life depends on it, I can't give that to them. They'll break all their teeth.
Okay. That is good to know.
Our nephew pups are that way. So.
Yeah, are they?
Yeah. No deer antlers for that.
I need to be careful with my nephew pups. Okay, so let's get into supplementation. I feel like you painted a really good picture for what a raw dog food would look like or even cooked, but supplementation for dogs is new to me. So what are we looking at? What nutrients should we supplement with? And then where can people find these types of supplementation?
So I guess I want to circle back maybe to a raw food diet and maybe give some more details about what ingredients go into that. If someone's really curious about how to feed that, because supplementation ties into that. Because there's two types of supplementation. One is essential supplementation, meaning you have to supplement certain vitamins and minerals to ensure that you're feeding a balanced diet, which is really important. If you're like preparing or feeding some sort of home prepared diet, you want to make sure it's balanced and has all the nutrients that they need. And then there's supportive supplementation. So you're supporting maybe adding a joint supplement or something for the dog's gut health. But if you don't include that, it's not like your dog is going to have issues with a nutrient deficiency. So they're both really important. Now, going back to a raw food diet, I know I mentioned that you want to have the majority of it should be animal protein. But if someone's interested in actually feeding their dog a raw diet, it helps to have actual ratios of things so they know how much of everything to feed. And if you are listening to this and you want to feed your dog a raw diet and you love the idea of it, but you kind of get overwhelmed about sourcing all the ingredients and preparing it, there are options for a commercially prepared raw diet, and those are widely available. So, not really like a PetSmart or Petco, but if you have smaller independently owned pet stores, a lot of them will sell different raw food brands, or you could purchase them online and they send it to you shipped. So those commercially prepared raw food brands have all of the ingredients that they need to be balanced and all of the supplements. So it's a complete and balanced formula. It comes to you frozen. You basically just defrost it and feed it. So that's a really, really easy way to feed raw. Now that is a bit more expensive because you're paying for the convenience of the company to create that diet for you. Now, if you wanted to do a homemade raw diet, you want to ensure that it is balanced as close to NRC standards as possible. So NRC stands for the National Research Council, and they are the big organization that puts forth these nutritional guidelines for dogs and cats. And I like to detail that because if you search raw food recipe for dogs, I don't know what you're going to find. You're going to find things that are really unbalanced. You might find things that are great. Please do not ask ChatGPT to create a raw diet for your dog. It's not balanced. It's not accurate. The amount of crazy recipes that I see formulated from ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever it is, don't do that. Now, if you go online and find a raw diet balanced according to NRC standards for a dog, great. That's probably complete and balanced. But if you were to create it yourself, there's going to be raw bone in the diet. There's going to be fish. I like to feed small blue oily fish, sardine, anchovies, herring. That stuff is mackerel. That's really great for dogs. There's going to be some skeletal muscle meat. So that's going to be the cuts that you find at the grocery store: ground beef, beef chuck, pork loin, turkey breast, whatever, some sort of skeletal muscle meat. There is going to be some sort of liver. Liver is like the multivitamin of your dog's diet. It's a really high in vitamin A, really high in copper and zinc and all these great things that they need. Typically, you'll have another sort of organ like kidney. You don't have to, but it does add a lot of nutrients to it. Heart, gizzards, all that stuff is great to add as well. But really, you're going to be having the majority of your diet is some sort of skeletal muscle meat. You're going to have a little bit of bone. You'll have some fish. You'll have really small amounts of organs. And you can add some plants. You can add some, leafy greens. You can add like sweet potatoes or cooked oats if your dog requires a little bit more energy. Let's say if they're like an athlete or a really highly active dog. And there are specific percentages for all of that. And I do have a course, just like to plug it really quick. It's a raw feeding course. If you ever did want to create a raw diet for your dog, but you needed more guidance, I think that's really helpful. And there are a lot of resources online to help you find those ratios. But I do like to say that if that's overwhelming to you, go the commercially prepared route, even if it's just for a month. Get comfortable feeding this to your dog, get them adjusted to a raw diet. Really easy. You don't have to worry about the balance. And then as you're feeding that, start to do some research and find out where you can source these ingredients and how you can make it yourself.
Mm-hmm. It's great advice. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Now, for supplementation, if you are making a dog's diet yourself at home, odds are you're going to have to supplement some things. Vitamin E, vitamin D, it depends on the diet, but it's very rare that I'm feeding a raw food diet that's homemade without any sort of supplements. You're gonna have to add something in. Now that depends on the specific recipe that you're feeding. But supportive supplements for anybody who's listening, regardless of the type of diet that you feed, I think one really great way to contribute to the dog's overall health is to support their gut health. Mm-hmm. So your dog's microbiome holds the majority of their immune system cells, just like ours. And if their gut is a mess, their body's a mess eventually. And in veterinary medicine, there is a huge overuse of antibiotics for really, really benign things. For example, a dog gets diarrhea and they're just thrown Flagyl, which is metronidazole, which is a really strong antibiotic. Wow. And I'll have clients who they've been on metronidazole 5 times in the last 6 months. And what happens, you get rebound diarrhea over and over again, and you're just destroying the gut further. But antibiotics are really heavily overused. There's also a lot of other things that will disrupt their gut health, like monthly flea and tick preventatives or we have the tendency to over vaccinate our pets. You know, we do give a lot of immunizations in one visit. It'd be better if we spread them out, or maybe decide on which ones are necessary for that dog's lifestyle, instead of just, you know, giving them everything on our vaccine schedule. Environmental toxins, pesticides, herbicides usage, all of that affects the microbiome. So I feel like every dog could benefit from some sort of supplement to help rebuild that. If your dog is on a kibble diet, I always recommend a digestive enzyme. Because that's going to help the body digest the food a little bit better. It helps to support the gut. It helps to kind of just lower the stress on the digestive system. So I think that's great. A probiotic is always great. And I always have people ask me about which type, rotate them and see which one your dog does best on. There's a lot of different options for digestive enzyme supplements for dogs, probiotic supplements for dogs. I would just rotate them and see which one, you know, benefits your dog the best. But digestive enzyme is great for any dog on a kibble diet. Probiotics are great if your dog is having some sort of, you know, chronic diarrhea, vomiting, stuff like that. Omega-3s are deficient in most dogs' diets. And the omega-3s that your dog's body will utilize are EPA and DHA, and those are available in fish and seafood. So if you can feed some sort of fish to your dog, that would be fantastic. And you know, people envision like a raw fish head on their dog's meal. Like you don't have to do that. You can go to any store and get canned sardines, canned mackerel, canned salmon. Canned in water, ideally with no salt added, if you can find that. But just adding that to your dog's meal, to any dog, first of all, they'll love it. It's really stinky, but they'll love it. And it adds a really, really concentrated source of omega-3s. You can also do a fish oil. If you're going to do a fish oil, I don't recommend salmon oil. I like fish oil made from sardines, anchovy, herring. Again, those small blue oily fish. I find it to be, it doesn't go rancid as easily, because fish oil is really prone to rancidity and just going bad. So I don't like salmon oil, but I do like a fish oil.
Is cod liver oil okay? Do you like that or no?
I do. It's just, it is made from liver, so it's very high in vitamin A.
Okay.
And so you just want to make sure that you are not feeding that on top of an already balanced diet that already has enough vitamin A, because you can have toxicity issues down the line.
Got it. And what about minerals? Like I've heard too that salt can be toxic to dogs. So are they getting any minerals? Is salt bad for them? How do we address that in their food?
I try not to salt their food. It's not toxic to them unless it's in pretty high amounts.
Okay.
We're told a lot of things are toxic, like garlic. Everyone thinks that garlic is toxic to dogs, where a 40, 50-pound dog would have to consume like 30 to 40 bulbs, entire heads of garlic to reach toxicity levels. Small amounts of garlic is actually great for them. You know, it's so there's a lot of things that we think are toxic to them. Like, again, bones, they can't eat bone. Well, they just can't have cooked bone. So some cooked diets utilize iodized salt to supplement iodine. So it's not inherently toxic to them. I just wouldn't go out of your way to salt their food. Now, to answer your question about minerals, that's one thing that I usually supplement to diets. We usually add some sort of zinc supplementation if it's necessary, but animal protein, especially the bones, are going to be pretty high in that mineral content, which is great. So you really don't have to worry too much about that.
Okay, great. The salt conversation comes up sometime. I think we had like an excess of some like roast meat that we were like, oh, maybe we'll feed this to our nephew dogs. And the concern was like, oh, if you salted it for human taste, it won't be good. Is that kind of salt, like, would they have been able to tolerate that if it was just stewed meat in broth?
They'll be fine. As long as they don't have any serious health implications, where they really sensitive to certain ingredients, for the most part, it's totally fine.
Interesting. Okay, that's great to know.
So what would be bad for dogs to eat? So I'm just trying to think, like, what are those kind of red alert, don't feed them this? Are there things they can't digest? And I'm thinking of it from, we harvest and butcher our own venison. So every year, and it's getting close to that time now, which is super exciting. We have deer season, and our kind of group or family may get 10 to 12 deer amongst all of us. And then we process it, skin it, debone it, package it, the whole thing ourselves. And I'm oftentimes left with a good amount of what I'm going to call like trimmings or waste, or things that would be
connective tissue, excess fat.
This is like your silver skin, your fat, your I tend to think like, surely we can't feed this to the dog. But I'm just curious that, but then also what else should we look out for dogs' diets?
So with your specific example, something that you're probably really familiar with is chronic wasting disease. That's something that we're really concerned about feeding to your pet because we're feeding these raw, food products.
Sure.
So first of all, you know what a deer looks like when it has chronic wasting
Yes.
disease. You're
Yeah.
probably not harvesting that for your family.
Correct.
But even then, there are certain parts of the deer that are more likely to have that contamination. So like the spinal cord, the eyeballs, I know it sounds weird, brain, and I believe it's the spleen. So you want to avoid feeding those to your dog. Now, in terms of like what you specifically said, all the silver skin, all the trimmings, all that is completely fine to feed your dog.
Okay.
Now, you want to give it to your dog in moderation. So if your dog has never had any sort of raw meat or raw fat, don't give them a bowl. They're going to get diarrhea. Yeah.
Okay.
Explosive diarrhea. And then you're going to be, discouraged from giving your dog fresh food. And that happens a lot.
Sure.
People, they hear an episode like this and they hear about all the things that they can feed to their dog and then they give too much. So silver skin, as long as it's something that they can chew, cut it into small pieces maybe.
We grind it. Yeah, we grind it for dog food if they can. They'll tolerate it that way.
That's perfect. That's great. You can absolutely feed that. So maybe the bones I wouldn't be feeding because those are pretty dense.
Sure.
Again, if you have a dog who's small and gentle and they'll kind of baby it, that's fine. But I wouldn't be giving that to a really aggressive, heavy chewer. They're just a little bit too dense. But all that extra trimmings you can absolutely give to them. I have a neighbor who hunts. He always texts me, "I got some meat for you," and I know that means that there's going to be a cooler full of venison trimmings that I can pick up for the dogs. You just want to make sure to freeze it beforehand if you can. So if you're processing the deer on the spot, ideally you don't want to give them pieces of meat. Ideally, you want to deep freeze it for a couple weeks to kill off those parasites if you can. If your dog has a little bit, they're probably fine. But if you're going to be feeding large amounts or adding it to their diet, you want to freeze it first for that peace of mind. Now, things in general that are toxic to them, there's a pretty short list, but grapes, raisins, chocolate. We all know about those. Xylitol, which is in some gum. So like those big list of toxic things for dogs. But kind of out of the box things that can be not great for your dog are large amounts of cooked fat. That's way more concerning when people give their dogs, human food scraps. I'm more concerned about them feeding cooked fat than salt. I don't really think about the salt. But if you have, let's say you made a roast and sometimes it's a chuck roast with a big, thick fat cap that no one's really eating, you don't want to give that to your dog. That's really tough on their pancreas. The ER is usually full with pancreatitis cases after Thanksgiving because everyone gives their dog the turkey drippings. You don't want to do that. Yeah. So all that cooked animal fat is not great. It's pretty hard on the pancreas. Raw fat is great. So again, if you're processing the deer and you want to give them some raw scraps of fat, that's fantastic. They can utilize that very well, but cooked fat is tough. So no bacon grease, no big chunks of cooked fat from your pork chop. Like I would avoid that.
Okay.
I'm really glad you asked that. Thank you. I'm glad because we can kind of just lump all this in one and think, oh, if it comes from an animal, give it to them.
Exactly. And I would have never guessed that.
I would have
cooked
never.
fat. I would have never guessed.
Yeah,
that.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe, again, things that aren't necessarily toxic but are not ideal are ingredients that are in our pet foods all the time. And I kind of do want to touch on those. Chicken is a big one. Commercially raised chicken is not great for your dog. One, it is the most common food allergy by far in dogs and cats. Wow. So if your dog is itching, if your dog has chronic ear infection, chronic anal gland issues, yeast overgrowth on their paws, so they're constantly chewing and licking their paws, and they're feeding chicken, switch to another protein. I can almost guarantee that you will see an improvement on their symptoms very quickly, or the symptoms completely go away. Because if they're eating something that they're allergic to or that there's an intolerance to, that is the root cause of these allergy issues. But so many pet foods contain high amounts of chicken or they're chicken based because chicken is inexpensive, especially commercially raised chicken. And we know that commercially farmed chicken is fed a diet really high in corn and soy, genetically modified corn and soy at that. The glyphosate residue in a lot of kibbles is really alarming. It's not great. And that comes through the chicken, also comes through the grains used. But commercially raised chicken is really high in omega-6 fatty acids, which can promote, encourage inflammation, whereas your omega-3s reduce that. That's why I like to add omega-3s to dogs' diets through fish or fish oil. But when you have a commercially raised chicken with really high omega-6 fatty acid content, it can become inflammatory. And it's one of the reasons why it's such a common food sensitivity. So I'm not against chicken, but I don't like it to be the sole source of protein in the diet ever. And if your dog has any sort of sensitivities, I don't like to feed chicken. Seizures are commonly triggered by chicken. I see that a lot.
Wow.
I see that
Okay.
a lot, and it's just because it causes some sort of inflammatory response. But again, it's not toxic, but it shouldn't be. It should be fed in moderation. And if you can source a higher quality chicken, that would be better.
Okay.
Other things like corn, soy, wheat, I don't like that in dog food. And it's really commonly found in your really popular kibbles. I have no problem name dropping, like Purina, Hill, Science Diet. What's the other one? Royal Canin. They almost always include those grain
Mm.
ingredients. And the reason they're included, it's not because they're ideal for your pet. It's because they're inexpensive and they're energy dense. So they're
Mm.
really high in calories and they can provide calories to the food without increasing the cost.
Wow.
And that has skewed a lot of people or their mindset about how cheap it is to feed their dog, because you can get this 40-pound
Mhm.
bag of kibble for $25. And then I talk about feeding a whole fresh food diet, and they're like, well, the price of pork or the price of beef. And it's not, why is a whole food diet so expensive? It's, why is that so cheap? Why is that so
Yes.
inexpensive? Why is it 30 cents a pound? That's super
Mm.
concerning. And it's
Mhm.
because it's full of grains. And grains aren't inherently, again, not bad or toxic, but it should not be the majority of your dog's diet. So a lot of kibbles are 30-40% carbohydrates, and your dog has no nutrient requirement for carbohydrates. Zero.
Wow.
They don't
Wow.
need them. They get all of the glucose and all the energy that they need from protein and from fat. So you take this
Hmm.
dog has no nutrient requirements for carbohydrates, and again has a very short digestive tract that doesn't allow for a lot of fermentation. They have no salivary amylase that helps to start digesting the starches. So you have this carnivore that isn't supposed to eat carbs or doesn't need them really, and you're feeding them this carb-based diet or a diet that has high amounts of carbohydrates, and then we're so confused why they're so ill.
Mm.
Wow.
Especially with these diseases that are based off of inflammation. So these diets that are really high in these starches and grains, it's so bad for their gut long term, which affects their immune system. And so a lot of people say like, "Oh, my dog is allergic to grains," and they're probably not. They're probably just intolerant to them, and because again, they cause this inflammatory reaction over time, and they really shouldn't be eating them. So if you are feeding a kibble, I recommend avoiding those ingredients. No corn, no wheat, no soy. I don't like that. Millet, oats, sweet potato, things that are a little bit lower glycemic are always better.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's really good. I was talking to my dad about this episode and I was telling him, I was kind of comparing like kibble to like cereal, like the difference between like starting your day on cereal versus like eggs and sausage and
Mm-hmm.
vegetables and things like that. And he's like, "Well, it literally is cereal." He used to work at a like cereal manufacturing factory, and he's like, "We'd give our leftover cereal to the dog plant and they would let or to like dog food plant and they would just pack it in there as, I don't know, some sort of additive." And I was like, "Oh, glory.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is adding up now. That this is making more sense as to why you're saying it isn't truly ultra processed food because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it absolutely is. That's insane." I want to touch on the seizures a little bit too because I personally growing up had a dog that their seizures started at 2 years old out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere. And I was never sure if it was like something in the house or something she was eating in the backyard or something part of her dog food. We medicated her, but it really didn't help. And then she ended up having a very tragic death. So, like, and I do see other dogs with seizures quite often. So, like, what is contributing to seizures in dogs, and how can their food help heal them?
So, a lot of seizure disorders are labeled idiopathic epilepsy. So, it's some sort
Right.
of epilepsy that we don't know the cause and we don't know what caused it. And the unfortunate answer or annoying answer, I guess, is it's usually a combination of factors. A lot of the times it can be triggered by some sort of toxin exposure. So, pesticide or herbicide spray. It could be a reaction to a flea and tick preventative. That's actually really common.
Oh,
So,
wow.
internal flea and tick preventatives, one of the most common side effects we see is seizures.
Wow.
It could be a vaccine injury. Our pets receive 5 to 6 vaccinations per visit in their first between 6 to 16 weeks if you follow the recommended puppy vaccination protocol. I'm also not anti-vaccine. I just think that we don't need to be giving 20 vaccines to a puppy between the ages of 6 to 16 weeks, which is the average. So that compounds on top of internal pesticide usage, like internal preventatives, less than ideal diet. So it's usually a combination of things, but we see a lot of success with treating seizures with ketogenic diets.
Oh,
A
wow.
lot of success. And I think this, like the statistic is like 70 or 71% of dogs show a significant improvement or decrease in seizure activity when you switch them to a keto diet. So ketogenic diet is pretty high in fat, high in protein. We always recommend switching to a whole food diet, whether that's raw or cooked, and huge improvements are made just by treating it with food. So
Wow. Okay, that's really encouraging. I know that's one thing we didn't address as pet owners. We tried the medication, and we were still early in our. This was what, like 15,
Absolutely.
20 years ago. I think today my parents would absolutely have been open to trying a whole foods diet for the dog because they've really transformed in their thinking.
But it's really easy to have something like that happen, and you're just looking for someone to tell you what to do. And when you go to a veterinarian, like they're going to give you a medication.
Sure.
And I guess that would be the ask, Isabel. Is there a medication that you think? And again, maybe this isn't your lane or not, but is that something that people should also consider if they're dealing with? I'm thinking about Maddie.
Yeah, my puppy.
Like, should you have just given up the medication,
I know.
or should
wanted
it?
to.
Like, what do you think? If Elizabeth could go back in time and kind of like influence that situation, what do you think would have been the appropriate protocol?
It's definitely not my lane in terms of like stopping a certain medication,
Sure.
but I would talk to the vet about, hey, let's try food therapy. Can I start them on this ketogenic diet in addition to this medication? The answer is almost certainly yes. I would probably continue the medication, even if you saw just some improvement, see how they do on the ketogenic diet. And if you get to a place where you're seriously reduced seizure activity, or they don't have seizures anymore, talk to your vet about reducing the medication and kind of observe them from there. But I would rather get them to a more stable place before we start messing with medication.
Sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That feels very common sense. I like that. Okay, so let's see. I guess my question is like, maybe you don't have a timeline, but if you are someone who has an animal and you're like, I would love to implement this real foods diet, how quickly can we see change in that dog?
So, I mean, you see change very quickly with their bowel movements. So that decreased, healthier, smaller stool, you see almost immediately. You see a better attitude around mealtime, which I think is great. I think it's so exciting when I see my dogs get so excited about eating. It's the best part of their day. So you see that change. But in terms of like skin and coat health, if you're addressing allergies, it takes a few weeks. It does take a few weeks. But removing the irritant or removing the allergen from their diet is going to be big. That's probably a bigger factor in improving their health. But you'll see a really big difference within 2 to 3 weeks. You'll notice better overall health. If you're dealing with a dog that has trouble losing weight, you should see that improvement within 2 to 3 weeks. Again, you'll see healthier skin, healthier coat. You'll see cleaner teeth in a few months. That takes a little while. But they're pretty quick changes.
I didn't even consider the dental impact. So they're going to have less tar buildup and just cleaner teeth on that whole foods diet.
Yeah. So if they're on a whole food diet and they consume raw meaty bones, that crunching and chewing and tearing does a lot for cleaning their teeth.
Oh, wow.
So especially if they're eating like a turkey neck or maybe a pork rib or some bone that has connective tissue and muscle around it, it's almost flossing their teeth.
Right.
And it's going in between their teeth and it's cleaning things off. But you're also not feeding high amounts of grains and starchy carbohydrates that could be contributing to plaque and tartar buildup, because they don't have, especially kibble, kind of like cakes onto the back of their teeth, especially like a canned wet food. And so that will just sit there and kind of decay at their teeth. But also they don't have salivary amylase. So they don't have any enzymes in their saliva that's breaking down those starchy carbs like we do. So it just sits there and ferments and causes a lot of dental decay. So removing those starchy carbs plus feeding raw meaty bones does a lot for their dental health. It's amazing.
Does this mean they'll have better breath? They won't have
Yes.
terrible dog breath? Okay, is that a symptom of like modern dog food? Because I can't handle the dog breath.
So yes, bad breath is usually due to either really poor dental health or poor microbiome health. It could be stemming from something internal, just like with us. If you have really bad breath, but you have pretty good teeth and you have good dental hygiene, you might want to look at your gut and see what's going on there. So a lot of dogs have really, really unhealthy microbiomes, like complete dysbiosis of the gut. So that could be stemming from that. I also get a lot of dogs with a lot of like acid reflux and like stinky
Oh.
burps and gas. Gas is not normal for dogs. So I know dogs that, you know, they clear a room. They're like, oh,
Right.
that's Fluffy. He farts. And it's like, well, that's really concerning. That's some gas is normal. Okay. Everyone expels gas. But if it's like a toxic fume, something is wrong here. We need to address this. What is rotting inside of you? But you know, and it's not that nothing's rotting in them, but he needs a digestive enzyme. He's eating something that he's intolerant to. Like, we got to figure it out. But gas is not normal. And that's a really common thing that I hear from people, like, oh, their farts are gone, and I, you know, contacted you to address their allergies, and now they have no more gas. And I'm like, well, that was, you know, it was another symptom of some sort of imbalance.
Sure.
Yeah, the compounding effect. I love that Isabella's telling us our dogs can have smaller poops that don't stink. Their breath will be better. Their teeth will be cleaner. They'll be happier, more excited.
She didn't say that the poop wouldn't stink.
She said it wouldn't be as bad.
It wouldn't be as stinky. So when a
See?
kibble-fed dog poops, I mean, it just wafts in the air, and you
Yeah.
can smell it from across a baseball field. My dogs, not just because they're my dogs. I mean, it's poop, but even like the next day, it's completely white and crumbly. And if you like talk to your grandparents, you know, ask them how dog poop used to look. It used to be like white and used to turn white in the sun. And kibble poop doesn't do that anymore. And I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I feel like dog food used to have more natural whole food ingredients, so it used to decompose faster. But it is less smelly. Also, they're less. If you have a dog who sheds a lot, that is significantly improved on a whole food diet. They shed less. They have. If you've ever pet a dog and then you're like, "Ooh, my hand is greasy," do this, and there's like it starts to pill and fall off. That all that dander, all that oil and grease is significantly improved. That's a symptom of they're eating something that's not agreeing with them. Something's going on. There's some sort of inflammation happening. There's some sort of allergy. None of that is normal. Your dog is supposed to have a clean, shiny, healthy coat. They're supposed to have good muscle tone. They're supposed to have good energy. They're supposed to be emotionally balanced and stable. Hyperactive and fearful, that's not normal. Not supposed to be stinky and like disgusting creatures. They're supposed to be a little healthier than they are overall.
Okay, you might be convincing me to get a dog. I'm not sure.
Whoa.
I know that's a lot. If pet owners are facing health challenges, where can they turn for support? I know we mentioned your vet is really good in some scenarios, so can you break that down where we can turn for support in those situations?
So I love to take the dogs to the vet for any sort of acute injury or illness. Okay, so if there is acute, meaning, you know, it needs immediate attention and it's not a chronic, constant issue. So your dog out of nowhere has this really bad hot spot for whatever reason, and there's this clear infection, go to the vet and get some sort of antibiotic treatment or something topical. Your dog has a raging ear infection, again, an acute infection, go to the vet. They break a nail or they break their leg or there's something that needs immediate attention, the vet is great for that. Now, if you notice that it's a chronic issue, chronic allergies, chronic GI upset, that's where you have to turn to food and more holistic methods to get the body to a better place, to get to the root of the issue. So the problem with allopathic veterinary medicine, conventional veterinary medicine, it's a lot about treating the symptom, right? Masking the symptoms. So if the dog is itchy, I will give you antihistamines to lower that allergic reaction instead of going, why are they itchy? What is causing the allergic reaction? Is it the chicken in their food? Is it the pollen? Is it their immune system is compromised because their gut is like, a vet is not going to do that. A conventional vet, I can't speak for every single one, but most of the ones that I have experience with are going to prescribe you the immunosuppressant drug or the antihistamine or the Zyrtec to treat the allergies instead of going, well, what are they eating? Well, maybe let's try this diet. Maybe let's try this supplement. They don't really think that way. And part of that is people bring their dog to the vet for everything. And you know, your vet is expected to be this expert in every single area that is your dog, and they're not. They're a health practitioner. They're a small animal, you know, health practitioner for your dog. They're not a nutritionist. They're not a fitness expert. They're not a behaviorist. There's some vets who will specialize in that, but your average vet is not. Their education is not in that. So in conventional veterinary medicine, you're going to see a lot of Band-Aids being applied to the dog instead of getting to the root of the issue. So if your dog presents with a hot spot and you go to the vet and you get some sort of treatment and it goes away and it never comes back, fine. It might have been a bug bite that got infected. It might have been some scratch that got infected because your dog was licking at it. then your vet is great for that. But if you have a hot spot here that you treat with an antibiotic shampoo and that goes away and then it shows up here and now they have ear infections and now they're itching, we have to get to the root of the issue. And conventional veterinary medicine doesn't typically do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
So where do they go? I guess.
So I would recommend talking to either a nutrition professional, so certified canine nutritionist, who will help you come up with some sort of diet plan. So that's my nutrition services. That's what I do. I talk to people who have pets that are struggling or not. Sometimes I get the person that's like, I just got a puppy and I want to give them the best diet ever. I think that's awesome.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's amazing when people are, I just want to be preventative and just want to start from the very beginning and give them the best diet possible. But most of the people contacted me because their dogs are really bad allergies. That's the number one thing I deal with is allergies. Number two is digestive upset, like gastrointestinal issues. Those are the big two for sure. Seek out the health and nutrition professional. Find a certified canine nutritionist who has done a lot of maybe different certifications, lots of independent research. And I say that because canine nutrition is a bit of an unregulated industry, meaning there's no certifying body that gives you that certificate for a certified canine nutritionist and then you can practice. That certificate can come anywhere from a 800-hour course to a 20-minute course online.
Oh, wow.
So don't go with the first person that you see certified canine nutritionist. Maybe look for reviews, look for client testimonials, but look for a nutrition professional or look for a holistic vet. A holistic veterinarian are going to be much more well-versed in canine nutrition than your conventional vet. And so those are a little bit harder to find, but if you can find one that's within an hour driving distance, I definitely think it's worth it. There are also some holistic veterinarians that might offer telehealth visits, so virtual visits, but I would look for a holistic vet or a canine nutrition professional that can help you.
Okay, great. And you mentioned before we hit record that you do a lot of virtual consults with people. So you could, just because they're not local to you, they can absolutely reach out to you and book that way too.
Yeah, so my nutrition consults are exclusively virtual.
Awesome.
So that's pretty. I deal with people all over the world. Before we hop on the phone, because it's an hour phone consultation, they fill out this really extensive intake form that gives me all the information about the dog, so I kind of know what we're getting into. I know their history before we hop on the phone. We talk about what's been going on, what I think is causing it, what the best diet option for them is moving forward, best for the dog and best for the human. Because while I would love to put every dog on a raw diet, that's not feasible for a lot of people, and that's totally fine. That doesn't mean we can't make improvements. So we figure out what diet is best for them, what supplement regimen is best for them specifically, and then we hop off the phone, and shortly after I send them a pretty comprehensive meal plan, supplement plan to go on from there.
Wow, that is so amazing. I would definitely be one of those dog owners. Like, I'm going to call you the second I get a dog if I ever do and be like, just set us up right. Yeah. I love that energy that person was like, I'm just going to do that. Okay, well, we're going to get into the sort of like rapid fire section of the show. So I definitely want to get into brands. I know really good brands of kibble are out there or just other dog food options. So any brands that you can name drop on the show would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I would say my top brands, because not every formula is going to work for every dog, but I really like Nature's Logic.
Okay.
I really like Farmina. They're fantastic. I really like Open Farm. They're great. I like Carna 4, Carna, the number 4. They're great. Essence is also fantastic, but Nature's Logic, Farmina, Open Farm, Carnivore are my big top 4 that dogs typically do very well on their foods. Lots of different protein options. So those are really great ones.
Okay, awesome. What is the best way for folks to source the animal proteins for their homemade food, whether they're going to serve it raw or cooked? Should they go to the grocery store? Should they ask a butcher? Should they try to hunt it? Like, do you have a preferred way to source it?
Grocery store's great. The butcher's great. Things like Costco, Sam's Club, where you can buy things in bigger quantities. Typically, if you bulk buy something, it's going to be more cost effective. Okay. So that's great. But you can pretty much source it from anywhere. The only thing I would be cautious with are suppliers that sell food, like pet food for pet food consumption, because there are different regulations behind that. So if it says specifically like only sold for pet food consumption, that doesn't immediately mean it's bad, but I would ask them where they source their meat from.
Okay.
Because pet food can use a quality of meat called 4D meat. So the number 4, the letter D, that stands for dead, diseased, dying, and disabled meat.
Oh.
That's actually used in a lot of kibble, unfortunately. So that's another reason why kibble quality can be less than ideal. So if you send, cows off to slaughter and you don't have the animal can't walk off of the trailer for whatever reason. They've collapsed from heat exhaustion, they broke a leg, they're really, really ill, and they can't walk off the trailer. You can't use that animal for human food consumption.
Wow.
So that is sold to the pet food rendering plants, and that's used for pet food. So, and that can be sold for pet food consumption. So if it's specifically labeled as only for pet food consumption, I'm going to go, why? One, it might be because it has a raw milk product. But we know that that's not legal to sell for human food consumption. So you'll see like raw goat's milk only for pet food consumption, and
Sure.
it's perfectly fine. It's just raw. But if I see like a beef blend, and beef at the store is $3.69 a pound, and they're selling that for $1 a pound, I'm going to go, where are you sourcing that from? So a good company will always be super transparent about their sourcing. If they're kind of giving you the runaround or they're not answering, not ideal. So yeah.
Okay, that's great information. I didn't even know that. Now, can dogs have milk?
They can. I prefer raw milk. I don't like to give dogs pasteurized milk.
Okay.
Dogs don't naturally produce a lot of lactase, which is the enzyme needed to digest lactose.
Right.
So they don't do really well on like pasteurized dairy products. Now, if you were to feed goat's milk, that is typically also better tolerated than cow's milk, even if it is raw. So you'll see a lot of raw goat's milk fed to pets, which is a great source of probiotics, digestive enzymes, really great for their gut.
Okay.
But yeah, they can be fed to pets just in moderation. Give them a little bit, see how they do.
Okay. Good to know. Okay, and this one is sort of like a all-encompassing, like final thoughts. But like, if a dog owner could make one change today, what would it be specifically?
I would say feed them more fresh food. So any amount of fresh food is better than none. There is a lot of hesitation or I think myths behind adding fresh food to kibble. You absolutely can. Um, you know, muscle meat is great. Fish is fantastic. Even just an egg, cracking an egg into their bowl is totally safe and a great way to improve the quality of their diet. Leafy greens, fermented foods, all of these things are things that you can add to their food that all make a big difference. So the more variety of fresh foods that you can add to their diet, it provides a variety of different nutrients that helps to, increase the nutrient density of the diet, but it also helps to improve the diversity of the microbiome, which is really important. So just feed more fresh food. I think people are afraid to add fresh food to their dog's diet for whatever reason, which I understand the hesitation. You don't want them to get diarrhea, or we think that this is toxic or this is bad. But for the most part, your dog can eat it in small amounts, make sure you don't upset their stomach. But that is one of the best things that you can do to contribute to your dog's health.
I think there's also some fear that like you're going to, like you kind of said this, right? But like you're going to feed them something toxic. And like there's been a lot of, and I think we diffused a lot of them today in our conversation, but like, don't feed them chocolate. Like it'll kill your dog, right? Grapes. And again, you confirm some of these, don't feed your dogs, chocolate or grapes or whatever. But yeah, there was definitely a feeling of like, I don't know if my dog can eat this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we're also always told like don't feed them human food. So you're thinking like, oh well, like obviously that means like your cooked leftover dinner, which now that I know they can't eat cooked fat makes a lot of sense. But I think the idea of preparing food for your dog feels scary. Then like, oh well, this just comes manufactured for me. Like they know that it's like squared away. So yeah, this conversation's been very enlightening.
The bones thing, I learned a lot with the bones.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense, right? Because like a coyote is, when they catch a squirrel, they eat the whole squirrel. They don't like,
Yeah, they're not choking on the squirrel bones.
Yeah.
They're fine with it.
Right? Yeah. So, but now that being said, if a coyote takes down a deer, guess what they're not eating?
Yeah.
They're not eating the femur bones.
They're not eating
right.
They're not doing that. It's so funny because you'll find a coyote kill out in the woods and it's like the bones are there.
Sure. Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And I want to kind of ease people's minds because, like you said, feeding your dog human food, whatever that means, it's very scary for a lot of people because we're told not to do that. But kibble is a modern food product.
Sure.
We didn't have kibble at all until about after World War II. That's when we started to, that's when we created our modern dry kibble. Yes. We've had dogs for thousands of years and they've never been more ill than they are now. So again, it's not just diet. There's a lot of, factors contributing to that, such as the environment. But diet is a big part of it. But kibble is brand new, and owning dogs and domesticating dogs is not. We used to feed them scraps, from whatever we had hunted, whatever, we used to feed them scraps from whatever we cooked, whether it was raw or not. We used to feed them veggies or just whatever was left over from us. And they did great. They're kind of designed to scavenge a little bit. So giving them something that is so toxic that is going to make them really, really ill, as long as you're not feeding from that list, again, like chocolate, raisins, xylitol, stuff like that, it's very unlikely. The worst thing you'll do is they'll get a little bit of diarrhea, and okay, maybe I'll feed them less, or maybe they don't do well with beef for whatever reason, but typically they're fine.
That's great. Okay, Isabela, let everyone know where they can find you, because I know that there are going to be lots of people wanting to learn more from you.
Yeah, so the easiest way is probably my website, which is caninekarmatraining.com. If you just Google Canine Karma Training, it will show up. And I have a contact form there.
Cool.
I also have an Instagram, Canine Karma Isabela. Everything has like Canine Karma in it. But there they can DM me or, email me for some sort of way. But usually the website is the best way because it has my contact form and you can just contact me directly from there.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll be sure to link that below in the show notes. You can just scroll down on this episode and click right into that. So that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I hope, what I want to say to your listeners is that you have so much ability to improve your dog's health through simple things that you probably already have in your kitchen.
Yeah.
And just don't be afraid to do that. I know there's a lot of scary information out there, but they're an animal just like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And while we might be we feel cautious about adding new foods to our diet or trying something new, I think people are more afraid to feed their dog something foreign than their own child.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Like you get something to your kid and you're like, hey, well, I know that this is a fresh whole food. If they don't like it, they don't like it. If they get an upset stomach, okay. But with our dog, we're like, we're just really scared to do that. And it's just a lot of, we're programmed to think that kibble is the only and best way, and it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great encouragement. Thank you.
Yeah.
I dig it. Thank you so much, Isabel.
You're welcome.
All right. Until next time.